Now I share my screen. Today we will review on L4M6, and with this module is named as supplier relationships. And majorly we focus on how we build and develop the relationships with the suppliers. And in this revision, I will help you to scan on the most important errors within the study guide. These errors will be more often to be asked in the exam. They appear more frequently in the exam, and most questions will focus on them. Of course, there are other questions that may look otherwise, may look at different areas, look at other areas of the module. But don't worry. Often the revision, often the question, those questions will not be so many in the exam. Okay, let's start. As you know, L4M6 has 3 chapters. I need to number them here. 1, 2, and 3. Or 3 learning outcome, LO. In chapter 1, we discover on the relationship spectrums, different matrices in managing the relationship and other models such as butterfly forces and STEEPLE analysis. In chapter 2, we look at first we look at the procedure that have to form the relationship between the buyer and the supplier. Then we look at how a cross-functional team and other models such as team development, cost modeling, and early supplier involvement. And finally, we look at how a relationship is terminated and end. In chapter 3, the major focus is on the partnership. And regarding this topic, it has very many small other topics like the different type of partnership, or the how we identify the drivers and the facilitators for partnership. And finally, we look at the reason for partnership failure. Strictly speaking, this structure, my presentation and my revision is strictly follow the study guide and the syllabus from SIP. Okay, let's start. And before we start, I want to tell that if you have joined my other revision sessions, you will see that I often review on the form questions. But I study again on SLEEP policy on sharing the question. I think that instead of sharing the form question, I can only tell you about the error that the question will focus on. This to avoid any complication with SIP, and I want to avoid the trouble with the infringement of any SIP policy. Hello, Piawa. Can you hear me now? Often this glitch due to unable to connect audio. And normally you will need to wait about 2 or 3 minutes to to connect audio. Hello, everyone who cannot hear me. You can try to connect your audio by clicking on connect audio if you are on a phone or on a laptop or any computer. If I see your macro icon on my screen, I think that the problem is solved. But to anyone who does not show the macro icon here, I think that you cannot hear me. Okay, if you cannot hear anything, and then you can wait until we upload this recording to YouTube channel. So we should not waste the time of the others. Okay, we go into the content of the revision. First, I will quickly recap on spectrum of the relationship spectrum. This spectrum is an error that I can say that it has quite many questions in the exam. In this spectrum, the problem here is that it has a lot of type relationship here. And when I say about spectrum, it means that we have a lot of options and a lot of flexibility on uh, to collect to select. And about the spectrum, many students will worry about the whether they need to remember all these type of relationship. My answer is that you don't need to remember them all, but at least try to remember some key relationship, key type relationship, such as adversarial, arm's length, uh, outsource or single source, then partnership and co-destiny. Uh, there may be some question on the type relationship, and beside that, there are also question on the change of the spectrum to on the left or on the right. You see here we have the left side and the right side. What the change on the left and on the right? It is already shown on this. It is already shown on this graph. On the left side, the duration of the relationship is shorter, and on the right side, longer. the trust is lower in the left side and higher in the right side. The communication is more close in the left side and more open in the right side. And regarding problem solving in the right side, it is kind of more jointly problem solving. So that is what I can say about the spectrum. It kind and note that, don't worry, you don't need to remember all these type of relationship, just some key one, and just to remember the change of the characteristic of this relationship along this line from the left side to the right side. And there is another two other models that you need to know well. We already know that we have branching portfolio and supplier preference or supplier perspective model. And these two models are already well explained in the study guide. In the exam, they often ask you about the correct quadrant of the of this model, of this matrix. Yes, Mohammed? Can you tell me about your concern?
Yeah, yes, brother. Thank you very much. I would like to ask in the relationship spectrum, sometimes they include a partnership and co-destiny, and then they may ask the highest commitment. So if in case I found the two answers, which one could be best to choose? Thank you.
Okay, good. I will come back to the relationship spectrum. Okay, this spectrum is also printed on SIP study guide, and we follow the SIP study guide. And you are saying that which one will be the highest level of relationship? Then you see that the spectrum here show that co-destiny will be on the top, and partnership is second on top. And regarding your question, actually, you know that SIP has the type question in multiple choice, and they offer 4 weeks to mark all of the answer of the students. Why do they have 4 weeks? Because they also monitor the answer. If they see that you select this option, it has some kind of reasons or some kind of reasonable, then they will accept that answer, and they will get marked for that questions. But that case is not very common, and you know that the question from SIP sometimes is very confusing, and it may has more than one correct option. Yeah, more than one correct option. Then they will test our ability to comprehend and apply the knowledge from the study guide to the question. Then if your answer is reasonable, then they still give you mark for the question. Come back to this graph. SIP study guide also show it on this page. So I think that we have only one correct option here. The highest level of commitment is on co-destiny. Okay, I hope that my answer satisfies you. Now we come back to the matrices within the study guide. We already know that there are two very famous matrices for procurement professionals. First, quadric, and second, subject preference. Normally, question here focus on the quadrant of each matrix, and they may also ask you how to deal if we fall into one of the quadrants. Let's quick recap on these metrics. In project portfolio, we already know that we have 4 quadrants: routine, leverage, bottleneck, and strategic. They help us to categorize the item we purchase in our portfolio. And to each quadrant, we have different methods to manage. For example, for routine items, they are very small in value and low risk, so we can delegate the task of procurement to other function or automate it, or we try to pulling these items into big contract and run the tender for it. For leverage, the best option here is to maximize the competition by using invitation tender, by running tender. For bottleneck, it has high risk but low value. We try to make some alternative. We try to do something alternatively, or instead by we do it in-house, or we pulling the needs and try to negotiate with the suppliers. And for strategic items, the best option is to upgrade the relationship with them to partnership and collaborate with them closely. In supplier preferencing matrix, we also have 4 quadrants: nascent, exploitable, develop, and core. This quadrant, this matrix show us how the supplier see their customer. For nascent, they will see that we have low value and low attractiveness, so they kind of to ignore this type of customer. For exploitable, this type of customer is of high value but low attractiveness, so they will milk that type of customer, fetching higher price to recover their costs. For developed customer who has low value but very attractive, they try to develop into higher type customer. They try to encourage the customer to spend more. And the final quadrant is core. They try to collaborate with the customer and offer more benefits to attract the loyalty. So that's how they treat each quadrant of the customer. And we, the buyer, should also have some way to deal with each quadrant. For example, if we know that we are under nascent or exploitable quadrants, we should increase our attractiveness. Even our spend is small, we should increase our attractiveness by helping them to access to the customer base, or helping them to going through the procurement process. So, or facilitate their join into the tendering or request for quotation. We don't need to have to be such unfriendly buyer. The question can focus on how we should deal with each quadrant. And I have just quickly remind you on these matrix. I hope that you will easily solve the question, this type of question in the exam. Another tool for relationship management and also can be appear in the exam is Porter 5 forces. As you know, this model is also very famous and is also mentioned in other modules like L4M2 or L4M5. And as usual, in the exam, they tend to ask about what about the factors that can shift the balance between the force. For example, for example, they can ask you about what factors can shift the balance of bargaining power between the buyer and the supplier in a given industry. So this type of question is not very tricky, and it kind of very straightforward. So I will skip this part and try to focus on more tricky and more important uh, areas of knowledge. Another model what mentioned here is STEEPLE. As you know, STEEPLE is an abbreviation of this word: social, technological, economic, environmental, political, legal, and ethical. These are reminder of macro factors that can impact on the relationship and on the procurement in general. For example, we purchase from an industry, say we purchase some kind of IT products. So we also have the macro environment like the technological. There are some new trends in technology, so we can leverage that trend and upgrade our system to the most updated, to the state of art one. And other factor also has the influence. For example, when there are some points in the economy we have high inflation, such as now, and high inflation will nudge the central bank to increase the interest rate, and it will be more difficult to borrow from the bank in this time. So it is an economic factor that have an impact on our purchasing. And if we need to purchase some kind of capital expenditure now, or some kind of capital assets now, it will be less favorable because the interest rate is very high, and we may not be able to repay the interest if we need to borrow from the bank and make the purchase. In the exam, the type question here tend to focus on the example of each factors, and the secret to answer this question correctly is to focus on is to understand the content of each factor. Such as in social, we have issue like the age, the age, the demographic, like age, gender, like the structure of the population, like the ethnic group, etc. In technological, we tend to focus on something like the trend of technology, In economic, we focus on like interest rate, inflation, GDP growth, and foreign investment. Environmental is something like the pollution and water, the pollution and other natural factors like the natural resources reserve and other factors. For political, we focus on election or civil unrest or domestic war, civil war and international war, international military actions. For legal, we focus on new policy, new law, and new regulation. And finally, for ethical, we focus on the new idea or the side guide, such as we have like anti-racism or anti-vaccine kind of ethical. Yeah. What is right and wrong? What is the opinion of the mass? Okay, that's all I can tell you from the first chapter. Sorry, that's not all, but we have another part, and in chapter 1, as we know, it majorly focus on these models: the spectrum, the matrices, the 5-force, and STEEPLE. And finally, in chapter 1, there's a very interesting part, 1.4, and it answers the question how to achieve the 5 rights from procurement perspective. Why it appear here? Because I think that is my opinion. I think that we as procurement, we do every action and the stages, every action, every process, and every stages to ensure the some objective. And majorly the objective here to achieve the 5 rights. And in 1.4, they tell you about how to achieve the 5 rights by using your procurement skills. Like if you want to achieve the right price, what we should focus on? We should focus on how to write the correct specification to avoid the overpricing. And we focus on negotiation, and we focus on tendering to get the best price. Okay, Mohammed, what do you want to ask?
Yes, brother, thank you very much. In the case of macroeconomics, I would like to ask the key differences between political and legislative, because sometimes I found that they narrate scenarios and it's very hard to choose, be it political or legal. Thank you very much. Over.
Okay. So you want to we convince people, and Mohammed want to ask about how to distinguish between political or legal factors. We know, actually, yes, I agree that sometimes it's very hard to identify the difference between political and legal. And my secret, what I can tell you is that about legal, or legislative, we focus on the introduction of new law, or any change in the written policy here by they propose new laws, or proposing new law and new bill. And for political, we know that political has origin about when we are talking about political, we are talking something relating to the state, such as the change of government by election, or such as the enter or exit of any trade bloc like Brexit, or some country joining the European Union or African Union. And other factors relating to the state, like civil war, the government had to fight some kind of insurgency, or something like the international war, two states combating each other. So to sum up, legislative or legal, we all talk about the introduction of new law or new legislation or new regulations. And regarding political, we talk about everything else of the state, the change of government, the change of the personnel, the strike, the war, civil unrest, and everything regarding them. Except, yes, about political, we don't talk about, yes, except the proposing of new law and new legislation. Regarding this, I have to admit that in the exam, we had question on how we add on the example of each of the STEEPLE. So it may have you may have some kind of scenario, and they ask you whether it is technological, environmental, or political, or legal. So the answer here is to how to we distinguish between political and legal. And as I say, political is about everything regarding the state, except the proposing of new and the adoption of new legislation or new regulation. Okay. So we come back to the fried rice and part 1.4 of the study guide. About the fried rice, we already know that they are the objective of procurement, to have the organization to have its competitive advantage, or to have it to achieve its objective. And part 1.4 of the study guide aims at how to achieve this fried rice by using your procurement skill. And I'm saying about ripe rice. We are achieving ripe rice by doing something like challenging the specification so that it cannot be over specified and avoid additional costs. Or we focus on running tendering, or running request for quotation and select the best price one. Or we focus on negotiation with the suppliers to get the most favorable price. And we do the same, not exactly the same, but we do similarly to other rice. Like for rice quality, we focus on challenging the specification and focus on the needs of the user. For rice quantity, we focus on to manage the inventory and estimating the needs, the future needs. For right time, right place, we focus on planning and identifying the needs of the stakeholders. This knowledge, as I remember, has not too many questions in the exam. I even don't remember what kind of question we have here. but it is very helpful for you to identify your objective and to increase the role of procurement within your organization. Okay, that's all about chapter 1. We move on chapter 2. In the opening of chapter 2, we return to focus on the procedures of how we onboarding the supplier. As you know, supplier relationship is the stage that happens after supplier, after the selection of supplier, and after the contract award. And we only manage the supplier when they become our suppliers by signing the contract. Regarding this, we have the procedures like request for quotation, request for proposal, and invitation to tender. And in the exam, they may ask you about this process, like asking you about the criteria for selecting the supplier, or how we should doing some should we do request for quotation, invitation to tender, or request for proposal, and how we should pre-qualify the suppliers. That's the error question that can appear in the exam. I believe that as procurement professionals, you already know all of them. For example, you already know how to run request for quotation, how to run tender, how to run tendering, and how to pre-qualify the supplier by using the questionnaire. The question regarding this error tend to focus on those very basic things. So don't drop marks on this type of question. In chapter 2, as I revisit here, in chapter 2 we also focus on models. And there are some models to consider, like cross-functional team, the team development stages, cost modeling, and early supplier involvement. And about this model, they tend to focus on the advantage and disadvantage of this model, as well as how do they apply in procurement context. For example, when in procurement should a cross-functional team form? Something like that. And how do we make this team more effective, more efficient? The question regarding this tend to not to be many, and they tend to very small. Again, and also in team development, they don't ask you about the advantage and disadvantage of this model, but they ask you about the stage. Actually, in the study guide, we tend to focus on only four stages: forming, storming, norming, and performing. How do we know about this stage? Informing, the team is newly established, and not everyone know well about each other, and they tend to focus on communicate and know each other better. in storming, the team already work for a time and they often argue, and the argument can be very productive or counterproductive based on the team characteristic. And if the team has a very unproductive argument, then they tend to dissolve and never escape this stage. If they can have productive argument, and they can process into norming stage. The team now has been work for a while and they know each other better, and but sometimes they have some struggle to maintain integrity, and some team member will be arguing with each other, and at this stage, the leader of the team will still has a role in resolving the problem, and in performing the role of the team leader is less significant. The team is working together for a while, and they know each other well, they understand the other well, so they don't need the team leader to tell them to do anything. They are very proactive and work effectively. But in the difference between performing and norming is that in norming stage, the leader still has role in in resolving the conflict between the team members, and the conflict here is not as fierce as in storming, but they still had sometimes they still had argument about the productivity, about the performance of team member, but they can be resolved by an effective team leader. In performing again, the team leader has less significant role, and the team member now can work independently as well as as well as collectively, and they rarely have argument, rarely have conflicts, and they can solve them very easily. In the exam, the question here tend to focus on these stages and asking you to identify the correct stage. And finally, we have early supplier involvement, or ESI. And the question here tend to focus on the advantage and disadvantage of this model. About the advantage, early supplier involvement will have the attendance from the supplier from very early in product development. And that approach will have advantage of having better expertise, or we understand better about the product. But the disadvantage include the very long process. Like we know that in the team development as well, because we work with the new one, the new representative from the supplier. So the team likely have argument, and sometimes it is not productive. And other disadvantage include the risk of losing intellectual property. You may revisit the book for more idea on advantage and disadvantage of this approach. And I believe that the advantage and disadvantage here is very intuitive, and you may easily guess the answer based on the question and its options. Finally, in chapter 2, we have a part on the termination of a relationship. Regarding this, as I show here, you should focus on three major things. When the relationship is terminated, it can be terminated based on the end of the contract. The contract comes to a natural end, like it comes to the end, such as we sign a contract with a supplier which say that the contract will end in 2 years, and the deadline comes and the contract ends naturally. Nothing to do here. Also, we can terminate the contract because the supplier has finished its obligation and we also pay them. Like we ask them to build a house to ask them as the contractor of construction project, and they finish that project, then the contract naturally ends. We only need to pay them. That's also lead to termination of the relationship. And this scenario is happens happen more often, like the contract has some kind of problem and at least one of the parties agrees to terminate it. And regarding this scenario, it is more complicated than the former tools. Therefore, we need to consider the consequence of contract and relationship termination. Like we know that when the contract is terminated, it is terminated prospectively. And I explain this word prospectively as the contract ends at the time we terminate, at the time of the termination. We don't need to perform any other future obligation. But we need to consider the restitution of already performed obligation. And also we also need to consider the other consequence regarding the intellectual properties or the data or the access we have delegated to the suppliers. This can be the question in the exam. What should we consider when we terminate the contract? And they may give you some scenario and ask you what you should focus here, what you should consider here. And normally the consequence, what we should consider here include like the consequence of the termination and other factors like the data, the protection of data, the protection of intellectual property, the protection of trade secrets, and the handling of the access. Those may become possible answer to that scenario, but depending on the specific situation, it may differ. Maybe very small difference, but it still matter. And you should read the scenario and decide which factor will be more important there. Finally, chapter 3 solely focus on partnership. And I suggest that you should go to Google and search this document, developing and implementing supply chain partnership, written by Douglas Lambert. He is a professor in the US. In fact, SIP study guide is written based on this research paper. And what Douglas Lambert have emphasized in this paper? He emphasized on three things: the drivers. Before saying that, I need to say that he do some research, and I discovered that successful partnership relationship must be based on three things: the drivers, the facilitators, and finally the framework in which the partners work with each other. So what are the drivers and facilitators? The drivers are the reason that can push each of the partner into the partnership. The stronger the drivers are, the higher likely it is more likely to have the partnership, to have to have stronger partnership. The driver may push the partners can be the desire to reduce costs and optimize the cost, the desire to improve the services, the desire to have better marketing image, or the desire on possible growth into the new market. The drivers here does not include like something like the desire to outsource, or the desire to focus on the core business. The drivers for partnership is very similar to the desire to integrate your business with other business, like merging, like acquiring other business. The drivers here also very similar. We need to reduce the cost and improve our strategic stand, or we need to focus on the service and expand the market, or we need to improve our images and let the customer know more about us. So the drivers include these factors, but not something like focus on the core business. The question on driver can appear in the exam, so you need to note about it. And in the book, they also mention a little about it. On the other hand, the facilitators partnership relationship include the factors that may improve or strengthen the relationship, like something like culture. The two organizations that have similar culture tend to work better together, or the two companies which has have similar philosophy also work better together, or the two companies that has symmetry, that which, for example, like big company cooperate with the big company, something like that. That's symmetry. The company with symmetry also work better together. So for example, I work at a small company, so my company cannot be a partner of bigger company. We should collaborate with the similar size company. In the exam, they tend to not ask about the facilitator, but they do ask about the drivers. So I advise that you should remember this thing. And also, the chapter 3 also has other content and other areas on the topic like when does partnership apply, like whether it's applied to high spend or low spend, or high trust or low trust relationship, or when we need to enter the new market and something like that. The question can be focused on which scenario the partnership will apply. And also there are some questions on the reason for the partnership failure with or without scenario. The question here tend to very straightforward, and it's very simple. For example, they give you a scenario and ask you, it is a scenario for partnership failure, and they ask you what would be the reason for this failure. Of course, in the scenario they highlight some indicator like poor communication or poor partner or poor leadership or lack of support from senior management, and you may easily choose the answer based on the scenario. L4M6 is not a very complex module, and therefore we have reached the end of the revision. We provide this revision for free. So if you want to support us, please go into Udemy and search for our questions. And to get the best price, please enter the coupon code Lucky July. We only offer these price test at $9.99 each for each module. L4M6, our L4M6 has 128 questions, and you have a lot of opportunity to practice them before sitting the exam. So my revision, my presentation ends here, and now I will listen to your question, and I will try my best to answer them. If you have any question, please raise your hand and please raise your hand or type in the chat. Is that Mohammed? Are you having a question now? Hello T, in the early involvement, we don't have any content here. Actually, I only emphasize on its advantage and disadvantage, and you can easily find it. You can easily find it from the study guide. So in this slide, I don't have any very much content, only a image for reference. Don't worry about that. Regarding this, we only focus on the advantages and disadvantage of this approach. Is there any question? Is there any other questions? if you follow SIP exam statistic, you may realize that L4M6 is always among the highest among the module with the highest pass rate. Actually, I feel that it does not have much content to say about. It kind of very very basic question. And in the exam, they tend to ask you very basic thing like the reason for failure or advantage or disadvantage or the quadrant of the models. It is very familiar to you as you study SIP until now. And in our real job, salary relationship is managed by mostly by soft skill. So SIP only provide you some kind of framework that you can consult when we have problem. But normally we work by using our soft skill. So that skill cannot be taught by only reading the book. They only provide you some kind of framework so that you can use and apply flexibly to your job. Okay, because we finished our revision very early, so I will come back to SIP website. And I see that SIP website has been updated, and it comes with a lot of problems, such as some students are not able to access to their MySIP account. And to access to your MySIP account, you need to reset your password. How to? We click on login. Click on login here. Zoom out a bit. And click on forgotten password here, and enter your email address. Then you do as the instruction, change the password before we can enter to our MySIP dashboard. Also, last week I asked SIP about how to access to my previous results and academic exam. They say that they are currently working on transferring them, and it will be available in the next few days. And in the meantime, they will try to send the email on your exam status. Like I have an exam on L4M2 on 11 July at 9 a.m. local time. So because we finished our revision soon, so I advise you something regarding your SIP account. Remember to reset your SIP password, and you can go into your dashboard and check your information. But until now, the information is blank, and I cannot access to my previous exam result data. They say that they will update it in the next few days. So we just need to wait. Okay, the revision. If you don't have any questions, I think that I should finish the revision here now. And we will have the exam starting next week. I hope that all of you will have best result in this exam series. Now I finished this revision and hope you all the best. Have a good day.